أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So this topic, the idea here is that we like to almost deify our heroes. We're obsessed with being superheroes and having superpowers. But so what we've done is we've taken our heroes, our real heroes, not the fake fictional ones, but we've taken our real heroes and we've tried to do the same thing to them. We've tried to turn them into superhuman. We don't want to accept our own humanity. And so what we want to do is, if someone is a hero to us, we want to somehow make them superhuman. We can't accept that someone can be a human being and still be our hero and be someone who is of utmost excellent character. And so there's this tendency that I've seen in our community to almost try to take the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and turn him into something superhuman. And I think this is a flaw that we have as human beings, and it's not only us that do this. But in fact, from the beginning we're told in the Quran that the people in the past used to do this too. They used to say to their prophets, but you're only human, right? It was like this idea that so long as they were human like them, they couldn't be prophets. There was this idea that to be a prophet, you have to be superhuman. You have to be an angel. And so there was this, they had trouble accepting these prophets, peace be upon them all. Why? Because they walked like them, they talked like them, they ate like them, they married like them. They couldn't accept that someone could be a prophet and still be a human being. And so I think it's so important that we understand, and this is actually very interesting because we also do this to our leaders. We also do this even to our shuyukh. We do this to our teachers, is that in a sense we put them up on a pedestal and make them superhuman. We can't think that they would have flaws. We almost think of them as, and this is something that we find, is that we don't think that they have human lives. They have flaws. They will make mistakes. It's like, again, this idea of putting someone that we respect and someone that we admire, we tend to try to put them at a higher level or like a pedestal. And this can be very dangerous. This was something we're warned about in the Quran, that this is what we should not do to the Prophet ﷺ, as some others did in the past with their prophets. And so what I want to begin with is, how is it that we should view the Prophet ﷺ, and how is it that we can connect to him? So I was thinking about what parts of his life really, really inspire me, and really inspire me from a human level. And so I thought of two things, and I want to just share those two with you. And the reason is that it's such a beautiful example of how someone can live in this life and yet still be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because this is one of the hardest things that we find, right? When someone wants to be very spiritual, for example, often we see that if someone wants to be very spiritual, there is sort of like a practice of, moving away from the world, right? Going off the idea of being an aesthetic, and the idea of what does it mean to detach oneself from dunya. Does detaching oneself from this life mean that I pull off, and I live in a cave, I don't get involved with the community, I don't get married? And so it's very important, because Islam came with this balance. It gave us the opportunity to live in dunya, to be involved in dunya, to be involved in the mundane, and still be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the epitome of this example is in the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the two examples that came to me that are very, very special to me, one is the example of what happened when Aisha radiallahu anha was being accused. And we know the story of when Aisha radiallahu anha was being accused of being unchaste, and then how it was such a trial for the Prophet ﷺ and for the family. And these two examples that I'm going to give are two of the most difficult times in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. And so this is when his wife is being accused. And at this point, it was before the revelation had come, exonerating her, right? Proving her innocence. And what really struck me is, what was his response? Okay, if you can imagine yourself in this position, and what would your response be if people are accusing your spouse of something like this? But look at what his response was. His response was, he went to her and he said that if you are innocent, it will be proven. And if you have committed this, then, and this is the part I want you to focus on, if you have committed this, meaning you have actually done this, look what his focus was. His focus wasn't, how could you do this to me? His focus was, you're such a terrible person if you did this. His focus wasn't, to shame her or to attack her. You know what his focus was? If you did this, then repent to Allah. So his focus for her wasn't his own ego. It wasn't his own rights that she would have. If somebody does that to their spouse, they are overstepping the rights of the spouse. But that wasn't his focus. His focus wasn't his own rights, his own ego. His focus was her relationship with God, her relationship with her Creator. Even if you did do this, then just, make it right with God. And so his biggest concern right then, when he didn't know, was her relationship with her Creator. And I found that amazing. I found that absolutely amazing, that the Prophet ﷺ loved her in such a pure way that it wasn't about him and how he appeared. Like a lot of us put in that situation, we'd feel like, how could you do this to me and my reputation, right? How could you dishonor me? A lot of us naturally would think of ourselves, right? We think of what it meant for me, what it meant for how people are going to look at us, and what are people going to say, right? What are people going to say about my wife? You've dishonored the family, right? This type of thinking, whether, it's the daughter or it's the wife. But he's not even thinking like that. He's telling her, just make it right with God, because his concern was about her hereafter. His concern wasn't about what people are going to say and the fact that he was going to be dishonored. And so I just found that so inspiring. The other example was a time when the Prophet ﷺ was at his most difficult, painful period of his entire life. And this came after the death of his beloved wife. And then shortly, within the same time period, he also lost his uncle. And these were two of the most beloved people to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And not only were they among the most beloved, but they were also among his greatest supporters. So two of his greatest supporters were taken at around the same time. And that's why this year was called Aam al-Huzn. It was the year of sadness, where he lost Khadija radiallahu anha and his uncle in the same period. Now, after going through this tragic loss, he goes to Ta'if. And when he goes to Ta'if, he's going there to get support. He's going there, during a time which is very difficult, looking for someone who will support him. And when he gets there, as you know the story, he was treated so badly, and he was thrown out of the city, and he was pelted with stones to the extent that he was made to bleed. And the Prophet ﷺ, this type of treatment was given to him at a time when he was already grieving. So if you can imagine where he was at this point. And then he left, and this is what I want you to focus on. So this is a man who has just lost his beloved wife and has just lost his beloved uncle who raised him and took care of him and protected him and supported him. And now he's been treated in this way, where he came to he came in peace to these people, and this is how they treated him. So at this point, he makes a really profound dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I advise everyone to look up this dua, the dua of Ta'if. It's so powerful. But there's a couple reflections I just want to make about this dua, very inspiring. First of all, at this point, what was the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's reaction? See, a lot of times when we're put in a situation where things, you know when they say, when it rains, it pours? Has that ever happened to you in your life? A point in your life where it's like one thing goes wrong, but then everything goes wrong, and it feels like everything just keeps on going wrong. One loss after another. So at this point, it's one thing after another. How does he respond? Is he angry? Is he angry at the people? Is he angry at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Well, you're going to see. First, he calls out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and listen to what he says. He complains, and I want to emphasize this here. Usually when things go tough for us, we complain about that which is causing it, right? Sometimes we even go to the extent of blaming God. How could you do this to me? Why me? It's not fair, right? Sometimes we react this way, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for protection from that type of reaction. But the Prophet ﷺ at this point, he says, I complain to you. Who's he complaining about? He says, I complain to you about my own weakness, about my own inability. In other words, he's complaining to Allah about the fact that he's only human. And the fact that his own inabilities, he's not complaining about Allah. He's turning to Allah about himself. He's humbling himself. And then, and this is the other part I really want to focus on, he calls out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at this point, and he says that if you are not angry with me, then I don't mind. He says, if you are not angry with me, then I don't mind. So you see again his focus. And the reason I brought up these stories is because I want you to understand and reflect on the focus of the Prophet ﷺ's heart, right? With Aisha radiallahu anha, the focus of his heart was what? Allah and her relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It wasn't the people. It wasn't what are they going to say. It wasn't how's this going to appear on me. How's this going to look on me? And then here, his focus again is on Allah. He says, if you are not angry with me, even though he had been through so much trial at this point, right? In fact, later on when he was asked, what was the hardest time in your life? He said it was that time, the time of Ta'if. So this was a man who was tested again and again and again. He went through torture. His people were tortured. They were starved. They were boycotted. And that he's saying this was the hardest time in his life. So you have to understand where he's at psychologically and emotionally. And yet his focus is still, is Allah pleased with him? He said, if you are not displeased with me, then I don't mind. And now the angel comes to him, and the angel asks him, just say the word, and we will take these two mountains and destroy these people who have just treated you in this way. He's a prophet. And he says to that angel, so now look, again, he didn't have anger towards Allah. In fact, his concern was just, is Allah angry with me? As long as Allah is not displeased with me, then I don't mind. But he didn't even have anger towards the people. He was given an opportunity for justice, really, just revenge. And he was given that opportunity, and it would have been fair because he's a prophet. This is an angel. And the angel said, I can take these two, just say the word, and I will crush, these people can be obliterated. Bring the two mountains together. And you know what he said? He said no. Because even if they don't believe, there may come from their progeny a people who will believe. And that's exactly what happened. And now we have in Ta'if Muslims. That is indeed what happened. And it was because the Prophet ﷺ, his focus was on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and because of that, he didn't get consumed with his own, this human feeling of I want revenge, or these things that we get caught up in terms of our ego. Now we might look at that and say, That's the Prophet ﷺ. But what is it about the Prophet ﷺ that we're supposed to emulate? And what is it that we can learn from this? How can we apply this in our own lives? That's really the question, and that's the take home. And really, here's what it comes down to. The heart is a thing that whatever you focus on, whatever your heart focuses on, grows in your life. So, if you're a person who focuses on your image, how you appear in front of people, your ego, your pride, then that becomes the most important thing. It will grow. If you're a person who focuses on what do other people think, what are other people saying about me, what are other people doing, and how are other people perceiving me? Am I being approved of? If that becomes your focus and your obsession is on what other people think and what other people say, then that's going to become more and more significant in your life. What you focus on grows. And here's the thing about human beings and the way that the heart works, is that whatever we love most in our lives, so just take a moment, think about, okay, what do I love most? Everyone loves something, but what do we love most? And if you look deep into your heart and you find that thing that you love most, that same thing, whatever it happens to be, is also your master. So what does that mean? It means, in other words, everyone worships something. Everyone worships something. So you might say, well, what about an atheist? An atheist doesn't worship anything. An atheist doesn't even believe in God. And I will tell you that even an atheist worships something. It's just not God. It's something else. But everyone worships something. What does worship mean? Worship at its essence is ultimate love. I'm going to repeat that. Worship at its essence is ultimate love. It doesn't have to be through prayer. It doesn't have to be through, supplication. But it's the thing that you ultimately love the most. That's why we have people who worship money. It's not because they've made an idol out of money. It's because money is the most significant thing to that person. That person loves money more than any other thing. And so that person is a slave to money. So the question here is, what is it that you love most? What is in your heart, at the core of your heart, and that thing is what becomes your master. Now, why this is so essential is that as we go through life, many people have trouble answering this question. But every single person is driven by that which they love most. So the question now is asking yourself, what is that thing? For those people who have in their hearts, and this is, unfortunately, we live now in a society where we're starting to become more and more obsessed over fame and image. How do I appear? See, now with the boom of social media, what's happened is you and I have found a platform where our egos can be on display. Does that make sense? We're basically the center. We're the star. Have you guys, when you're little growing up, you're watching like a sitcom and there's a star of the show, right? And maybe growing up you were like, man, why can't I be the star of a show? Now everyone gets to be the star of the show of their life, right? And it's like everything is put on display for an audience, right? Everything, even down to what you ate today. Don't lie, you took a picture of it, right? You know what I'm saying? Everyone, see, it's like you're always being watched. You're always being watched. There's how many thousands of people know what you ate today? Yesterday, the day before, right? Every moment, every movement that we make, we take a photo of it and we post it for the world to see, right? So there's always an audience. Even if it's as significant as I got a haircut, right? My burger had lettuce today, right? These are important enough to tell the world. Now that might seem like, well, what's the big deal? But I'm talking about something deeper here. What's happening is we've started to focus on the wrong things. We've started to focus on our image. We've started to focus on how do I appear. We've started to focus on status. You know, there was this questionnaire. They asked millennials what their goals were. And the vast majority of them said to be famous. To be famous. And then after that, it was to be rich. So this is actually it's become such a goal that it's consumed our lives. Now, why is that relevant to what we're talking about with regards to the Prophet ﷺ? The reason it's relevant is that whatever you take in your heart and you love most, if that thing is fame, if that thing is image, if that thing is money, if that thing is what other people think, then that's going to be the master that dictates how you live your life. What you do, what you don't do. What you say, what you don't say. So you're no longer living your life for God. You're living your life for people. You're living your life so that people will say. Or you're living your life so people won't say. Can we just be real for a second? How many women, and maybe men, are in extremely dysfunctional marriages and or even abusive marriages, and they are told, just stay because what are people gonna say? What are people gonna say about you if you leave a dysfunction? They're gonna say this, or that. We've become so obsessed with what people are gonna say that we're even willing to have our own children, our own sister, remain in a dysfunctional, even abusive situation just so people won't say. This is a type of worship. This is what happens when we have the wrong focus. The Prophet ﷺ's focus was on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so his actions were for his pleasure. They weren't for the pleasure of people, and they weren't about image, and they weren't about even seeking revenge. How many of us find it extremely difficult to forgive? No one? How? Okay, only like one person. Okay, so some people are being honest. Thank you. One person raised their hand. How many of you find it very difficult to forgive? All right, okay. So let's talk about that. You know, when Aisha radiallahu anha was accused, and again, before the ayah was revealed, there was a lot of rumors being spread. You hear a rumor, and then what do? You spread it. Without verifying, you spread it. So that's what people did. Well, her father, Abu Bakr, found out, radiallahu anh, that one of the people who was spreading this rumor about his own daughter was a relative. And not only was he a relative, but he was a relative that Abu Bakr, radiallahu anh, was financially supporting. Can you imagine that? That one of your relatives who you're helping them out is slandering or spreading slander about your daughter. And so when Abu Bakr radiallahu anh found this out, all he didn't go for revenge. All he did was stop the financial support. Like, that's the least we would do, right? We'd do a little more probably. All he did was stop the financial support. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed an ayah for this incident. And in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says something that we all have to reflect on. And that is, he says, let them pardon and overlook. أَلَا تُحِبُّونَ أَن يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. This is what's being presented to Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. Look at the way their hearts worked. I just want you to see how their hearts worked. Allah is saying to him, pardon and overlook. Why? And now this comes to the question of, but so-and-so doesn't deserve my forgiveness, right? Have you ever felt that way? No? Have you ever felt that way? You know how we keep track? We know what someone did to us on February 1st, 2003. We know what they did at 3 o'clock, right, and 2 minutes. And it's almost like we keep a diary. We don't let it go. We keep track of everything that someone's done wrong to us. And then we don't forgive because they don't deserve our forgiveness. Maybe they never apologized. Maybe they never even regretted it. This is very difficult to forgive, right? Look at what's happening here. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh is being told to pardon and overlook, to forgive. But why? Is it because this man deserved it? Is Allah saying because he apologized? What is Allah saying? أَلَا تُحِبُّونَ أَن يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. It's a completely different focus. Allah says, do you not love for Allah to forgive you? You see? It's a paradigm shift where it's not really about Abu Bakr radiallahu anh and that relative. It's about Abu Bakr radiallahu anh and Allah. It's actually about his own relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the question is, do you not love for Allah to forgive you? Do you see the shift? The focus wasn't on the other person. It was on his relationship with Allah. And so, because Abu Bakr radiallahu anh indeed wanted the forgiveness of Allah, and these were people who were like far beyond us. Because he wanted the forgiveness of Allah, not only did he continue that financial support, he increased it. Why? Because this transaction was between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, it's about focus. Because if you look at it, when you forgive someone who's wronged you, you get something in return that is priceless. You get the forgiveness of Allah. Does that make sense? Let me give you guys an example, and then inshallah we'll wrap up, and I'll give you a chance, inshallah, to ask questions. How many of you are like aware of Black Friday deals? Like Black Friday, right? Okay. What happens during Black Friday sales? Well, people act crazy. Okay. What happens during Black Friday sales is that something that maybe a laptop that's normally $1,500 will be on sale for, say, $500 or something. And there'll just be like 2 of them, and Best Buy just wants to bring you into the door with this sale, but there's only 2 of them, and so then you'll buy something else. That's the idea. But my point is, what do people do to get a good deal? Well, they do a lot of things. In fact, a lot of times during Black Friday sales, people end up dying. Do you know this? There's been cases where this lady, she's at Walmart, and she's got mace because she wants to get the video game first. I'm not kidding. Another case also happened at Walmart, actually, and it was in New York, I think. It was a few years back that one of the employees of Walmart actually got trampled because the people needed to get their deal. Like, this is the behavior that human beings have to get a good deal, all right? People will stand in line in the freezing cold weather, right? People will do tahajjud and qiyam at the mall, right? Because now it's like 2 a.m. Like, we will forget sleep. All of a sudden, we don't need to sleep. You know what I mean? Like, if it was like, if someone told you to wake up and pray at that time, it would be hard. But you're at the mall at that time. So why do we act that way? Why do human beings act that way? It's because we as human beings, we like a good deal. We like a good deal. So look at the deal Allah is making. Look at the deal God makes here. If we forgive this person who harmed us, in exchange for that, we get something infinite. So in other words, it's not a $1,500 laptop that's for $500. Imagine that there's a house, and it's like on the beach, and it's worth $10 billion. And it's your lucky day. Today it's on sale for $0.01. Would you feel like you got a deal? Not so much? Yeah, you'd feel like you got a deal, right? It's kind of like that, except that the house isn't worth $10 billion, it's infinite. So in exchange for something finite, okay, I forgive my cousin or my friend or my parents or whoever it is, my neighbor, my relative. It's usually a relative, by the way. I forgive that person, and in exchange, I get something infinite. So I've gotten something, the value of which isn't $10 billion, it's infinity, and I've gotten it for a cent. Something finite. Okay, I forgive. Now, what does it mean to forgive? Just to clarify, because oftentimes I get this question. Sometimes people think that forgiveness means that you continue to allow that person to abuse you. That's not what forgiveness means. Forgiveness means that in your heart, you forgive, but externally, you take action to stop that abuse. Does that make sense? Externally, we are a people of action. I never want to talk about forgiveness and have someone go home and think that it means being a victim. It doesn't. It doesn't mean turning the other cheek. That's not what it means. Because turning the other cheek means you've abused me and I'm going to let you keep doing it. But that's not Islamic. The Prophet ﷺ said, if you see something wrong, try to change it with your hand. And if you cannot, then with your tongue. This is speaking out against it. And if you cannot, then at least hate it in your heart. And this is the weakest of faith. So it's an active religion. It's not passive. But at the same time, while I am taking action against that injustice and making sure to the best of my ability that it does not happen again, internally I am forgiving. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم إنه غفور رحيم سبحانك الله وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك